Welcome to this explainer, fellas. Go ahead and grab a shop rag, clear off your workbench, and pull up a stool. Today, we're diving deep into the greasy guts of an absolute legend, the 1976 Honda CB750. Now, as a master mechanic, I can tell you there's a certain kind of magic to bringing one of these vintage machines back to life. But listen, it takes a whole lot more than just a metric socket set to get it right. You really need to know the specific DNA of this bike. So whether you're staring down a barn find that's been sitting for decades, or maybe a runner that just has a little bit of a stumble right off vital, we're going to walk through exactly what makes this machine tick, how to diagnose its specific quirks, and how to turn a wrench on history without, losing your shirt in the process.
There's an old bit of shop lore that says, after 100 hours at redline, you can still balance a quarter on the engine at idle. And honestly, that isn't just shop talk. It's a massive testament to the legendary smoothness of this machine. Think back to when Honda first debuted the CB750 in 1969. The motorcycle market was kind of the Wild West, completely dominated by leaky, vibrating British twins. The CB750's four-cylinder engineering pedigree literally flipped the script overnight. It was so reliable and ran so much like a sewing machine that it permanently put Honda on the map. And by the time we get to the 1976 models we're focusing on today, well, Honda had this platform totally dialed in.
Okay, here's our shop work order for today's diagnostic teardown. First up, the vintage superbike legend. Then, we'll look at the K model versus the Supersport. After that, mastering Kihin carburetors, curing those pesky electrical gremlins, and finally, the golden original exhaust. Let's jump right into Section 1, the vintage superbike legend. I want you to picture that we've got a beautifully preserved 76 CB750 sitting right in front of us on the mechanic's lift. Before we even think about picking up a wrench, we need to do a walk around and understand the raw mechanical heart we're actually dealing with. The heart of this legend is a 736cc air-cooled transverse inline-4 engine. It utilizes a single overhead cam, or SOHC, with 2 valves per cylinder. Now, one of the really unique features of this powerhouse is its dry sump lubrication system. What that means is it relies on a separate oil tank rather than keeping all the oil right there in the engine pan. Pumping out roughly 67 to 69 horsepower at 8,000 RPM, this engine was an absolute rocket ship for its time. This right here is the exact raw mechanical DNA that made the CB750 the undisputed king of the highways. Moving right along to Section 2, K model versus Supersport. Look, before you start buying restoration parts online, you absolutely have to know which machine you're actually dealing with. In 1976, depending on your exact build, you're likely looking at one of 2 distinct machines, the K model or the Supersport. The classic CB750K, which we call the K6, maintains that traditional, beautiful vintage aesthetic with a 4x4 exhaust and a 179mm mechanical rear drum brake. But back in 1975, Honda had a massive refresh and introduced the F1 Supersport. Now, the Supersport brought a much sportier cafe racer styling to the table. It swapped that exhaust for a 4-into-1 pipe, upgraded the rear braking to a massive 296mm hydraulic disc, and even bumped up the fuel tank capacity from 4.5 to 4.8 gallons. Mechanically speaking, the Supersport also featured slightly domed pistons, which pushed the compression ratio up to 9.2 to 1 compared to the K model's 9.0 to 1. Figuring out which bike is on your lift, that's step 1 to a successful rebuild. All right, Section 3, mastering Kihin carburetors. Go ahead and mentally pop the side cover off the bike with me, because we're digging into the mechanical secrets where most weekend warriors get hopelessly stuck. Here is the golden rule of vintage motorcycle repair guys. 99% of running issues on these vintage Hondas are carburetor related. I mean it. If you buy a bike that's been sitting for years in a shed, or maybe it runs but just stumbles right off idle, do not panic about the engine internals. These motors are incredibly bulletproof. Your focus needs to be entirely on the fuel delivery system. One of the most common and frankly annoying headaches you'll face is stuck float needles. When a bike just sits around with old gas in it, that fuel turns into a nasty varnish, and those delicate little float needles inside the carburetor bowls just completely seize up. This causes massive fuel flow problems. The bike will either completely starve for gas and die, or the bowls will just overflow, leaking precious fuel all over your boots and the hot engine block. It's an incredibly frustrating issue, and it absolutely ruins the bike's performance. So, how do we fix it? We follow a strict carburetor triage process. Step 1, drain that old nasty gas immediately. To keep your vintage bike running perfectly going forward, use VP ethanol-free fuel. Modern ethanol gas just attracts water and it's going to rot out those carbs all over again. Step 2,
After you clean the individual parts, you have got to synchronize all four 28mm Keyhine piston valve carburetors. They have to open and close in perfect harmony to run right. And step 3, and please listen to me on this one, leave the stock jets and the original airbox entirely intact unless you're having the bike professionally tuned. Honda's engineers really knew what they were doing in the 70s. Slapping on a set of cheap pod filters without knowing exactly how to read jet is going to completely ruin the smooth running characteristics of the bike. Just keep it stock.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, curing electrical system gremlins. Grab your shop light, let's head over to the other side of the bike. When a vintage Honda flat out refuses to fire up, or worse, leaves you stranded on the side of the road with a dead battery, this is exactly where we look. The original charging system on the SOAC engine is a notorious weak link. Specifically, the stator and the regulator/rectifier are your most frequent points of failure. The stator is what generates the alternating current, and the regulator/rectifier converts it to direct current so it can charge the battery. After 50 years of engine heat and road vibration, these vintage electronics simply give up the ghost, meaning the bike just won't hold a charge. The absolute key here is following our electrical triage. First, you've got to test those stator coils using the specific electrical wiring color codes to ensure they aren't grounded out or just completely fried. Second, hook up a multimeter and check the actual voltage coming from the regulator/rectifier while the bike is running. If it isn't putting out the right juice, well, it's time for an upgrade. Third, and this is a major resto mod secret I'm giving you, do not replace them with 50-year-old technology. Upgrade to a modern solid-state regulator/rectifier unit and swap out that leaky old lead-acid battery for a sealed modern AGM battery. Doing this means your classic bike is going to fire right up with the push of a button every single time.
And finally, Section 5, the golden original exhaust.
All right, this is the final appraisal step when you're looking over a CB750, and it really highlights the sheer financial stakes of a true ground-up restoration. Listen to this number, $1,500 to $2,500. If you find a bike that's missing its factory exhaust, this is exactly what it's going to cost you to source and replace it. Finding an NOS, which stands for New Old Stock Original Pipe System, is literally the holy grail for a CB750 builder. It is, without a doubt, the most expensive standalone cosmetic part of the entire appraisal process. And you might be wondering, why are they so crazy expensive? It all comes down to rarity. Roughly 65 to 75% of these bikes are missing their original factory exhausts today. See, back in the 70s and 80s, riders wanted these bikes to sound louder. So they chopped the original pipes, they cut out the baffles, they turned them into custom choppers, or, the pipes simply rotted away from the inside out thanks to condensation and rust. Countless original pipes were quite literally tossed straight into the junkyard in favor of aftermarket setups. Finding a set today with the chrome still intact and absolutely no damage, it's incredibly rare. So let's talk about the actual payoff. When you run the final numbers, you can really see why tracking down those original parts and treating the carburetors right is so important. A good, stock-running bike that's maybe missing its original pipes or just needs a little bit of cosmetic TLC will fetch anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000. But if you have an all-original, pristine machine, one that hasn't been dropped, still features the original factory paint, a spotless gas tank, and that incredibly elusive factory exhaust, you're looking at an estimated value between $10,000 and $25,000. Keeping a vintage bike bone stock, running smoothly, and properly restored isn't just a fun weekend passion project. It is the ultimate payday. So after digging into the engine specs, the required carburetor triage, the vital electrical upgrades, and the ultimate hunt for the perfect exhaust, I want to leave you with this final thought. These CB750s are incredibly reliable, beautifully engineered pieces of motorcycle heritage that literally put Honda on top of the world. The only question is, are you ready to get your hands dirty, turn a wrench on history, and preserve your own piece of mechanical brilliance? Thanks for joining me in the shop today for this explainer, guys. Keep your tools clean and your rubber on the road.